It's Radio Al Ansar on 90.4 and 105.6. Welcome back to the program. If you're clock watching, it is 24 minutes past 6 right now, the Wednesday edition of Straight Talk. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, that this morning everyone woke up to the grim news of the martyrdom of Ismail Haniyeh, who is the leader of Hamas. Iran's state television made the announcement of the killing early this morning as well. A statement by Iran's Revolutionary Guards said that Haniyeh and a security guard had been ambushed in their place of residence, and an investigation is now on the way. Haniyeh was the head of the political office of the Hamas Islamic Resistance, and he was in Iran for the inauguration of the country's new president. Joining me on the line now, or joining me via Zoom, and you can watch this interview as well, is the executive director at the Afro Middle East Center, Brother Naeem Jinnah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to Radio Al Ansar.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing this evening?
Surviving.
I think that's the summation that everyone can use at the moment. Brother Naeem, we saw this morning, the revelations coming through from the Middle East, the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh. Let's begin firstly describing this person who, of course, occupied news headlines, for some time, being the head of the Hamas movement, living in exile. Who was Ismail Haniyeh?
So he wasn't exactly living in exile. I mean, he's as the head of Hamas, he was in and out of Gaza. He was born in Gaza and lived for most of his life in Gaza, but he's not from Gaza. It's an important point. He was born in a refugee camp in Gaza, but his parents were from a depopulated village just north of Gaza. It was depopulated and destroyed, and then an Israeli town was built on it, now called Ashkelon, previously called Ascalon. So that's where he is from. He went to an UNRWA school, the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Organization, one of their schools, and then went to the Islamic University where he graduated. He taught, he was a teacher. And got involved in his student years, in particular in resistance activities with the Islamic Society at the university, and then when Hamas was formed, joined Hamas. He was also a close confidant and assistant to one of the founders of Hamas and the leader of Hamas, who was assassinated, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, was in and out of prison for a few years, spent on one occasion 3 years in prison before he was then arrested by the Israelis, and along with 400 other Hamas leaders dumped in Lebanon, literally dumped in the kind of no man's zone between Lebanon and Israel, and spent a year or so then in exile in Lebanon before returning to Gaza after the Oslo Accords. Remained in Hamas, and then in 2006 headed up the parliamentary list for the party that was set up by Hamas. And as you know, Hamas got the majority seats in the Palestinian parliament, and he was the prime minister, which didn't last long because other governments, particularly Western governments, didn't like him there, and threatened to stop funding to the Palestinian Authority. And then 2007, he was confined to Gaza, of course, and then a few years ago was elected leader of Hamas.
Absolutely. So he has had a long and illustrious career, in fighting for Palestinian rights and self-determination. How significant is his death in relation to the current genocide which is occurring, and how will it affect, Hamas operations going forward?
It's very significant in terms of the bigger picture. It doesn't really affect, so let me talk about that first. It doesn't really seriously affect Hamas and its operations. The manner in which Hamas operates organizationally It's a very painful democratic way in which it operates. I mean, Hamas elections take 6 months
Well,
when they elect their leadership. And part of the result of that is that although Ismail Haniya was the head of the Politburo of the organization is always run by a leadership, not a leader. And so if the top leader is removed, the organization will continue. I mean, when Sheikh Yassin was removed, that happened. When his successor, Abdulaziz Rantisi, was assassinated, that happened as well. There's no leadership crisis. There's no leadership vacuum. I'm sure Hamas will either very quickly or they'll take their time before they announce who his replacement would be. But it won't create a crisis. It won't change the policies of the organization, the fact that he's no longer the leader or no longer in the picture. And it won't change its resistance strategy. So the movement will continue on the same path that it has had. In terms of the bigger picture, however, it's very significant because it's an indication from Israel mainly that it is determined to pursue a path that will plunge the region into a regional war. Remember that in the space of about 18 hours, or in a period of 18 hours, Israel assassinated 2 senior leaders of 2 important organizations in 2 capitals of 2 different countries. That is Fuad Shukr. We assume that he was assassinated. We're not sure yet. His body hasn't been found in Beirut, and Ismail Haniya in Tehran. This extreme right-wing government in Israel has been itching to move the situation that has occurred in the past 10 months, the genocide taking place in Gaza, to move that into a regional war. They haven't yet succeeded, and this is another attempt to do that and to draw the United States into that war. So from that perspective, this is a very significant event. It's also significant in its timing, coming, as I said, 18 hours after that other assassination of Fuad Shukr, coming within hours after the newly elected Iranian president, in his inaugural speech, spoke about mending relations with the West, and very significant in terms of its location. He could have been assassinated anywhere else, but he was assassinated in Tehran.
In Tehran, of course, many have pointed to the fact that Israel is longing for a wider conflict in the Middle East. Of course, as you mentioned, the US not supporting that, not favoring that as well. What are we likely to see happen? What's going to unfold? Because we have the Iranian supreme leader, vowing to avenge the death of Ismail Haniya because it had taken place in Tehran. The world is on tenterhooks at the moment. What are we likely to see happen, in the next few hours or the next few days?
So first, let me say that the idea that the Americans don't agree with that. I mean, I don't think that the Americans want a regional war. However, they continue enabling Israel by supplying it with weapons. And the Americans, the Germans, the second biggest supplier of weapons to Israel, they continued for the past 10 months supplying it with weapons to conduct a genocide, despite what the World Court, the International Court of Justice, has said. And they continue to supply it with the weapons with which it attacked and destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus in April, the weapons with which these people were assassinated, etc. So America is very much complicit in the genocide and in whatever other illegal actions Israel undertakes, like these assassinations. In terms of the Iranian response, look, to be honest, Iran is in a bit of a quandary. Iran does not want a regional war. Iran has its own challenges, number one, economic, etc. in particular. And secondly, Iran doesn't want to directly confront Israel. It wants that to be done by Palestinians and those countries around Israel, like Lebanon. But it is now put into a situation where where if it responds, it's going to be condemned for responding. If it doesn't respond, it's going to seem weak in the face of this audacious transgression in its territory, and it's going to seem like a damp squib. In April, when it vowed revenge, in similar kind of language that Khamenei made now, it vowed revenge, and its revenge was a very choreographed attack that the Americans were informed about, and then they informed the Israelis about. We all watched the drones on our TV screens going in, getting shot out, etc. So anything less than that is going to make Iran seem like more bark than bite, and that's not a good position to be in when you're talking about the geopolitics of a region like that. So Iran is going to likely, there's a number of options on the two extremes. One extreme is that it sends a message by Switzerland or whatever to the Americans to say, bring your dog under control, otherwise things will get worse. And America then does that. And I think that that's unlikely. I don't think that America has the capacity right now, and it's in the middle of an election campaign. On the other extreme, it goes full out, and it's a possibility. And going full out means that this will be a regional war that won't be between Israel and Iran, but will engulf other countries, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, etc. And I'm not sure that Israel is in a place where it can win such a war. Remember that it's been in a kind of war for the past 10 months with essentially a bunch of militias, not even a state army, and has not been able to prevail. If it has to deal with an army like that of even Hezbollah, but more than that, Iran, I think it could come out the worse for it. But the point is that it will engulf the whole region in a war.
Absolutely. Now, the attack, of course, also called into question the quality of security that was provided to Ismail Hania. What could be said about that, in the fact that he was being able to be targeted right in Tehran, in the heart of the capital? Is anything made with regards to that?
I think the Iranians are asking lots of questions at the moment. Clearly, from the Israeli perspective, this wasn't just a success in terms of the military strike, but it was a success in terms of the intelligence. I'm sure that Abu Abid's location where he was staying was kept secret, etc., but the Israelis found out. We know that there are a number of Israeli assets operating in Iran. We know that there have been Iranian scientists, for example, who have been assassinated by Iranians acting on behalf of Israel. But this was certainly an intelligence coup for them. These are the questions that the Iranians will be asking themselves, how that happened. And then, of course, the operation itself. It was a kind of pinpoint operation using a very sophisticated weapon that was able to target that particular room where he was staying. So the intelligence certainly was very good in terms of them being able to pinpoint where to strike and when he will be there.
Absolutely. Well, as we said, it's a dire situation, and someone had commented that they killed the person that was in the position to negotiate. Now, you did mention that there's a proper structure in place, but with regards to ending this current genocide, what are the prospects looking like right now?
Well, I don't know what the appetite will be from Hamas now after this to immediately continue. In terms of the technical part of the negotiations, yes, Abu Abid was leading that from the Hamas side and from the side of the Gaza resistance. But his removal, doesn't mean that the capacity for it doesn't exist. The Hamas leadership is quite competent to continue those negotiations. Right now, however, I think that there will be lots of assessing and reassessing taking place about what should happen, trying to factor that in to what the Iranians are going to decide and how how that might work together with whatever Hamas decides. So I think we can assume that for the moment, the negotiations have been put on ice until they announce anything differently. Again, from the Israeli perspective, they would be very happy to not have the mediation proceed. Remember that a month or so ago, the American President Joe Biden announced that he had in his hand a ceasefire proposal drafted by the Israelis, so he claimed. Hamas, within an hour, accepted it. Israel to date has not accepted it, even though it's supposedly an Israeli draft. So the Israeli government doesn't want a ceasefire. They don't want this to end. They want to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. That's what they want to do. And also that all of the promises that Netanyahu made to his own constituency, he's realized none of them. All the objectives that he set for this attack on Gaza, none of them have been realized from a military perspective.
Absolutely. Brother Naeem, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights with us on Al Ansar. We really do appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. That was Naeem Jeena, the Executive Director of the Afro Middle East Center, talking to us about the latest developments coming through from the Middle East and, what we're likely to see happen within the coming hours or within the coming days. Clearly, a really sad situation, especially in light of what's happening in Gaza for the past 10 months right now. We'll be back.